Creator's will and let evil take control. Now the reckless men who lead them want to strip away their freedom and to steal their very soul. Now it's smoke and mirrors, switching bait, criticize and confiscate and let the guilty walk away. In this once righteous, godly nation, in the halls of education, they forbid a child to pray. They say we need to spread the wealth. They pretend to guard the health of the feeble and the poor, while the hand they hold behind their backs confuses and conceals the fact that the wolf is at the door. There's an unseen hand that pulls the string.
Well, good morning, Connecting the Dots listeners. We are Tuesday morning, as usual, June 25th, and today we have a program called Can the Constitution Save America? And that is a question that we really need to consider. I believe it can, but I believe it's going to take effort on all parts to make that happen. And to help to flesh out that whole concept and that whole idea, I have two guests on the radio show this morning who are dynamite at understanding just exactly how that system works. The first is a gentleman who's been on a radio program before, Brent Allen Winters. He is an attorney and a counselor at law. He is known as the common lawyer because he has written a number of books on common law and on what our court system is supposed to be. And he represents that when he goes to court, understanding what common law and what the foundations of our legal system are supposed to be. I also have someone on the show that I met at the Red Pill Expo in Hartford, Connecticut, just a week and a half ago. And Cal Washington has got a group out of Canada, and it's pretty much worldwide, but it's called InPower. And he talks about how really we have taken our system of constitutional common law courts and we have turned that into a corporate system. We have, and not we the people, but our elected leaders and people who have had the power to make, let's say, well, I guess we'd have to call it pervert the system. How they have done that and how they have created a corporate structure that is now going worldwide. And it is designed to control people, to eliminate all your freedoms, and to turn people into nothing more than slaves of the state. And so we're going to have a fascinating discussion today, and I really look forward to it because I think this is going to be one of the programs that our listeners can gain the most knowledge about our court system and about how our whole country is functioning. Incidentally, Cal is a Canadian resident, but he talks about the United States of America and our Constitution because he's done a lot of research and a lot of study on that. And so with that, I'll open the program with Brent Allen Winters. Brent, would you give our listeners a little bit of your background, and then we'll introduce Cal.
Well, thanks. Appreciate you having me on, and it's folk like you that allow me to get the message out. And I don't know where to begin when I talk about myself, because I know that the Bible says you're not supposed to blow your own horn. It's better if somebody else does it for you. You blew my horn a little bit. I don't want to overdo it, but just to say this, I've spent a lot of decades by myself. I'm still by myself. I'm out on a limb doing my own thing. My own thing is to be buried in a cave somewhere, as it were, and studying. And I go into court once in a while and try to help people. But I am a man that has spent time by myself. I started in a mining claim out west, and I began writing when I was in the mining business. And I was by myself in the wilderness, a mine operator for a company, and I began to explore the difference between the law of the land and the law of the city. I had been to law school by that time for a year. I had been a geologist before that. Then I got into a legal mess, and my partner says, one of us is going to have to go to law school if we're going to continue doing this. Had so many people trying to steal what we have, sue us in court. And he said, it's not going to be me. Well, he was the same age as my father. He wasn't going to go to law school, and I was a younger buck. And so he helped me. He didn't bankroll me, and I had 4 or 5 children then. I ended up going to law school, and then I got out, and I had a professor in law school. I guess this is a good place to focus. I had a professor in law school who is now deceased, but he was a prosecutor at Nuremberg. He was an Army officer, a young fella at the time, and he told me that the first thing they had to decide at Nuremberg was, are we going to use the law of the land or the law of the city to prosecute these Nazis? The law of the land is our common law. That was the law of England, still is the law fundamentally of England, the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and all of their former colonies and protectorates, smaller places. The law of the land. We call it our common law today. Previously, it was called the Volksrecht, and Magna Carta calls it the law of the land. Our Constitution calls it the law of the land. Our Constitution says that our Constitution is the law of the land, and indeed it is. It is a brief of common law government. Well, he said that was the first question they had to decide. And they decided to prosecute the Nazis according to the law of the land, or common law, because if they had prosecuted them according to the law of the city, the civil law, the fundamental code of Justinian, the canon law of the Church of Rome, being the two most salient expressions of that law in our own day. If they'd have prosecuted the Nazis under the law of the city, which was the law of Germany in the form of the Code of Bismarck, and the law, by the way, of Japan in the form of the Code of Bismarck, Japan had taken on the German code. If they had prosecuted them according to that law, they would have all been acquitted, because it is a complete defense to a crime under the law of the city, the law of the Roman Empire, the law of Babylon. It's a complete defense if you obeyed the government. If you obeyed the government, all you have to do is plead, well, I obeyed the government. How can I be guilty of anything? And that's why they decided to prosecute them under the law of the land. Winston Churchill went so far, he was kind of a brutal fellow in many ways, he went so far as saying that all the Nazi officers and the government officials that fled Germany, we should outlaw them, which would mean at common law, it's common law doctrine, outlawry, a little different than a similar doctrine, similar, as we say here at home, doctrine of the law of the city, has to do with kaput, capitation. But outlawry, he said we should outlaw them, which would demand that any law-abiding citizen, if they found them, they either have to bring them in dead or alive. You either have to kill them or turn them over to the government, which is a common law doctrine applied properly. We still use it in a limited way in America, or bounty hunters. Of course, we don't say bring them in dead, as the old Anglo-Saxons used to say, a wolf's head. That's what they called the man that was outlawed. But we prosecuted them, and the Japanese war criminals under the same idea, and they all pled, as was expected, that they couldn't be prosecuted because they obeyed the law of their flag and of their government. That's what they said. And therefore, of course, they expected to be exonerated. By contrast, General George Marshall, who was the ranking general officer of the United States military during and after the war, he sent out a general order to all courts-martial that were trying American boys for war crimes, because we had boys that committed war crimes. War always produces that kind of madness. They had committed war crimes, and he said this in his general order to the courts-martials of the United States, the military tribunals. He said, during these court-martials of Americans, obedience to orders can be an exonerating factor. but it can never be, not an exonerating, a mitigating factor. Mitigating. Obedience to orders can be a mitigating factor, but it can never be the exonerating fact. In other words, obedience to orders cannot be a complete defense to a war crime. Well, that is reflective of our common law tradition. Obedience to government in the common law tradition doesn't exonerate. Why? Well, because government in the common law tradition is not God. It has not taken on the status of deity. In Japan, under the German code, they weren't a Christian people, so that they could get away with that. And they said the emperor is God. He is the 142nd generation descendant of the sun itself, S-U-N. And so, of course, they were called the Nipponese. That's fundamental. Well, in Germany, they couldn't get away with saying that Hitler was God because they were too Christian, the Lutherans, and then Romanism was still there. Even though it was Romanism, Jesus Christ is venerated in Romanism. Not like he should be, but he is. But there were many Lutherans, of course. The northern half of Germany was Lutheran, generally speaking. And they couldn't get away with that, so they just said, well, no, Hitler is not God. Essentially what they did was they said, Hitler is like the Pope of Rome. He has received all the authority of Jesus Christ, and therefore there is no appeal beyond him. Well, that was fundamental to the communist, socialist, whichever word is used, they're both synonyms, socialist system of Nazism. Hitler became, even though he wasn't called God, he had all the powers of God on earth. He wasn't against God, as the Pope of Rome would say, but he was there to help Jesus Christ. He was, and of course, interestingly, Adolf Hitler supported the Roman Church, and the Roman Church supported him to the point of the Roman Church got all the Nazis out of Germany after the war, and did a very good job of it. Sent them all, shipped them, gave them false passports, and sent them to South America. Well, the difference is, I'm trying to draw is this, without getting on too many rabbit trails. The law of the land says that obedience to the government is a complete defense to any crime. The law of the city says obedience to government is a complete defense to any crime. And that, by the way, that code governs almost all of the world, every country, the Code of Justinian in its various forms. And the law of the land, our common law, our Constitution of the United States, is being a brief of common law government in writing, says that no. And by the way, our Constitution of the United States cannot be understood, as Justice Taft says, the U.S. Supreme Court, unless the common law enforces it. It is a brief of common law government. The words he uses are, it's common law government, the brief of it, put in compact draft. So without understanding something of our common law, the fundamentals of it, it is impossible, utterly impossible, to put the Constitution of the United States, put legs on it, and breathe life into it. The Mexican government learned that. I don't know if they learned it. We learned it about them when 20,000 Americans went to Mexico, or went to Texas at the invitation of the Mexican government, under a promise that Mexico would obey its Constitution of 1824, the Mexican Constitution of 1824, which was... it was very much like our Constitution. The phrase is lifted right out of our Constitution for the Mexican Constitution of 1824, but they never used it. And the reason they never used it because they didn't understand, as most Americans apparently don't today, that our Constitution is not a bolt out of the blue. It's nothing new. It wasn't a brainchild of the folks they call the founders. No, they just said to England, look, we don't want anything new. We just want you to allow us not to come over here and try to kill us, and allow us to exercise and use our common law freedoms. And so all of those freedoms, trial by jury, the Constitution of the United States says trial by jury. It doesn't explain it. It says freedom of religion. It doesn't explain it. It says separation of powers by putting our Constitution into three major sections and co-equal branches of government. That's our common law government coming from the Anglo-Saxons and the Anglo-Danes and the Celtic people in England. As Algernon Sidney said, their governments of the Celts and the Anglo-Saxons and the Danes, the Germanic people of Northern Europe, their governments were not only alike in general principles, but strikingly alike in detail. Of course, that was a struggle in England at that time to accept that, and the king had his head chopped off, and back in the 17th century for writing that book called Discourses in Government. It was one of the books that Tom Jefferson said was required reading at the University of Virginia. It's forgotten now. Algernon Sidney, Discourses in Government. But about myself, I like to start to say I grew up a hog farmer, which I did, and then I raised hogs myself after all of that back in the Midwest near Terre Haute, Indiana. I ended up being a geologist. My father worked in the oil patch, and I wanted to work in the oil patch, but then I ended up going west and getting involved in the mining business because the oil field at home was failing by that time to a great degree, and new discoveries were being made. All of the oil field is still there. And then I eventually became a lawyer. I ran for Congress once, had a lot of fun, caused me a lot of problems. I learned what was going on and a lot more on the inside and what danger is in politics, how brutal it is, how brutal the evil empire is, how brutal the law of the city is, and the law of the city presses upon us apace as we speak. It always has, and it always will. And here we are. What are we to do about it? We are to invoke our common law, and I understand we have a guest on with me that I have not met, but that he has learned ways to put legs on our common law. So I'm back to you. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I thank you, Brent, and I do want to get Cal into this conversation. I want Cal, I want you to explain how the InPower program that you've put together, what you're trying to do with that program, a little bit about your background, and then let's talk about how you view this corporate structure as something that is really controlling our whole society because of the way they've perverted what was the common law.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me on, Dan, and nice to meet you, Brent. So my background, I was just a family guy, and then I went through a divorce, and that's when I came head-to-head with the court. And once I was in there, I realized that what I had thought the court was not what I was experiencing. So it was more trying to find out what was going on. I could sense that there was something behind the scenes there. And so the whole journey, I mean, it took years, but that was the start of it. And once I was in court, started to learn a few things, then I realized that, I was allowed to drive without, the corporate, the government insurance, et cetera, because of the common law right to travel. And so I went down that road. I went down a bunch of roads as I was learning from different people, some of the techniques, et cetera, the name game. That's where you try not to be the capitalized name that's on all your ID and that would be at the court, et cetera. And what I found was a lot of things had some validity, but really didn't get the results that I was looking for. I ended up being arrested numerous times and, spending nights in jail and that type of thing. Then once I discovered what's called commerce, because I'd been down this road for a few years by then, a lot of light bulbs went off for me. I had epiphany after epiphany. The first time I came across this, then I could see what was going on and why I was losing in court. And because I would go in there with statutory arguments, as I researched, I would come up with really good statutory arguments, and I thought that was the goal in court. And, they were really winning arguments. Like they were ironclad, but I would still lose. They would just rule against me. And once I understood what was really going on in there, that's when the game changed. And the first time that I used a commercial instrument, the judge ran out of the room. So then that was the beginning of the end for them and the turning point for me. That's where the tide turned. There was still a lot of time where they still fought back, but that was a real demarcation point when I saw that judge run out of the room. And then I saw that numerous times afterwards. And so then it became clear that this commercial thing that I was learning was valid and real. And I couldn't be convinced otherwise, no matter what rhetoric I heard. And so that was my journey. After a few things happened, I was left alone, and I've been left alone for I'm not timing it, but probably around 10 years, where I don't get any correspondence from the government or any interaction with them at all. And that was my goal, was to not have this oppressive thing in my life telling me how I'm supposed to run my family, when it's clear in the Bible what my job is to do, and whether my family is broken apart or not, I still have to be accountable as a father. And the system as it was, although it has connotations of trying to help the children, and the phrase of deadbeat dad, those are all, as I discovered, mostly false, to get the society on the side of what they're doing to these dads. And most of the dads are just trying to be around their children, and if you try to do that, you fail, because it's set up that way. But I don't want to get in that whole rabbit trail either. The main thing I found was what I thought the government was and what I thought the courts were was not true. And once I dealt with what I did find they were, I got different results. And that's because of this thing called Lex Mercatoria. So that's the long and short of it.
Okay, well, Cal, I would like to have you describe, your journey into understanding what the whole legal system is. You mentioned commerce and how that ties in. So, if you would kind of put flesh on that statement by describing how the court system changed, how common law has turned into commercial law, and this is what Brent will also be talking about, and that comes from Justinian code, which is administrative law, and it takes the concept of right and wrong and really turns it on its head, where it becomes law of whoever is in power is the one that pretty much controls the legal system, and whoever is in power, irregardless whether they're guilty or innocent, if they have enough money and the right kind of lawyers, they can prevail in a court system that's perverted like that. So that's where I'm heading with this, and I want you to kind of describe how you covered the commercial law and how that really pertains to what's happened to our court system.
Well, what I discovered was there's this ancient system called Lex Mercatoria, or law merchant in sort of more modern terms, still an old description. But what happened, this was a law system, and it wasn't really like codified laws. It was more like customs and ways of doing things for the merchant class. And they had, in England, they had what were called pie powder courts. You can look this up. And they were the courts at the fairs. And what was happening as people started to trade internationally is you had many people with different languages, different law systems, different currencies, different ways of doing things. And so they had to have a dynamic way to settle disputes. And so all the different people that were merchants agreed to this system. And it's that system, once you learn it, then the things come clear as to what's happening today. So like you said, Dan, was it had to do with not so much the truth, because the truth, it was based on truth, but the truth was done by affidavit, and it was done by claim. So I don't know how far to go with this, but claim in the Black's Law Dictionary is the strongest word in law. And Brent probably knows a little bit about that if he was a geologist and making claims. He probably butted heads with some people. So claims are how this whole law system, even the Roman law, everything, and how kings became kings and all that, going way, 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 way back. When you get into the biblical story, God gave Adam dominion, and that is that's the main dispute on this so-called planet. And there's many other beings who have made claims that they are rulers or they have dominion, etc. And that's once you can get to that level, that's where the problem really lies. But going into this law of merchants, how it kind of worked was, if I was to say, Dan, you owe me $1 million, how you would respond to that would be to say, Cal, I agree conditionally that I owe you $1 million upon proof that you can prove that I owe you $1 million. And if you can't prove it, then you will owe me $2 million. So it was self-correcting, and that's why it worked. It was dynamic, and it was based on this type of thing. So I could come up with a lie saying I owe you $1 million, or you owe me $1 million. That's not really true. But if you didn't answer me in the correct way, it actually stood as true. And that's the concept that people can't understand when you're sort of a law-abiding, God-fearing person. It's the system, and if you understood the system, you would know what to do. So, and there's cases of this that you can see on old scrolls. So that whole system was meant to be self-correcting, and it was meant to be just in the merchant class, and they all understood it. So it wasn't for the common people. The common law was running alongside this, the king's 3 different courts. We're talking about England now. So, but they had the pie powder courts at the fairs, and then they had what were called staple courts at more of the ports where ships were coming in. And this is where admiralty law started to cross over. And a lot of people think that there's this admiralty law running. Well, it's kind of not true. It's more the merchant law, and admiralty kind of comes into it. What happened, and this is the key point, and a lot of people don't know this, it's not taught in law school, etc., is they merged the law merchant into the common law, and that was with Lord Mansfield in the 1700s. Because everybody liked to go to the merchant courts, because the merchant courts were very fast. You could start a process in the morning and have a judgment by noon. So the summonses would go out once an hour, not once every 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month or whatever. So you could, if there was a dispute, you would summon somebody to this court at 9 o'clock, then at 10 o'clock, then at 11 o'clock, and if they didn't show up, judgment went against them instantly for not showing up. And then there was more like similar to a vigilante type thing where they would just go and seize your stuff. And if you put that in the light of where we are today, you can see that those types of things are still operating. So
Cal, I hear our break music coming up. Hold that thought.
Okay.
We'll pick it up on the other side, and then we will be merging you guys together, because this is fascinating discussion. I know you both know the history. I think we can come up with some really great ideas out of this. So let's break, and we'll pick it up on the other side.
This is The Micro Effect. The Micro Effect. www.themicroeffect.com.
Well, welcome back to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel. And today my guests on the radio show are Brent Enters and Cal Washington. And Cal, you were talking a little bit about the commercial code and describing how that works. And I'd like to have you finish your thoughts on that. And then what I'd love to do is get you and Brent in a conversation, and let's see where it goes. But Brent is probably written one of the best books on the common law. It's called The Excellence of the Common Law. I happen to have that book, and it's a fascinating history of the whole concept of common law and why we are so unique in the world to have that legal system as part of our constitutional law system. And so that way, maybe when we get you two guys together talking about this with your InPower program and some of the things that you've been working on, maybe we can our listeners to really gain a better understanding of how the whole legal system was designed to work and why it's being perverted, and how we can really get around that, how we can go back to a legal system that's just. So anyway, with that, Cal, finish your thoughts on commercial code and how that whole process evolved.
Yeah, so basically you had the staple courts in the staple towns, and those were more of a fixed building type thing, and you would have a presiding judge, for lack of a better word. So what ended up happening is a lot of people started going to the staple courts to get remedy, because the common law courts would take months in order to get a judgment because of the stringent system you had to go through to prove things. Where the commercial courts were more or less just a little more loose with that, and it was based on a quick affidavit, etc. And if the affidavit didn't get rebutted, then it stood as truth, whether it was a lie or not. So that was the problem with it. If everybody understood how it worked, it would almost self-correct. But as soon as somebody doesn't understand it, a person who did understand it could take advantage, and that's the main problem that we have here. So what ended up happening is because people were tending to go to this court because of the speed, the king at the time, I can't remember who it was, but wanted to get control of those courts, and that was the main goal, and they finally did that. So they merged the lex mercatoria into the common law, and then the judges were told to take judicial notice of the common law, of the lex mercatoria in the common law courts if a commercial thing came in there. So they merged commerce into the common law courts, and then they really stopped talking about it, but it kind of kept going, and the court system tended to evolve towards lex mercatoria while people were still thinking it was common law, and technically it is. It's just the two are merged. And so now you have things like summary judgment, where it's not based on fact in the stringent way that the common law was, and the court system started to evolve more into a commercial court without telling anybody. And that's the problem that I found. So as soon as I started going into commerce and using commercial process and commercial instruments, that's when the court really started to pay attention to me, rather than me going up and saying, I'm not that, that straw man person, and I don't want to cross your bar because I'm going onto a ship, and all that stuff. I did all that stuff. As soon as I just went, I don't care about that. I'm putting in a commercial instrument, and I'm treating you like a business. That's when things changed. So the common law is not dead. It's just been buried under this commercial law system because it got fused in officially in the 1700s by Lord Mansfield. And once you can kind of trace that back, you can see why things are the way they are.
Okay, that's a great discussion, a great lead-in. Brent, I want you to. I'm trying to discourse between two very, very knowledgeable people here, so that we can come up with an idea of solutions to make our court system better, and to maybe help people deal with a court system that's pretty much out of control. So, Brent, I would like you to weigh in on the things that Cal has just mentioned on the commercial code and so forth, and let's see if we can get a really, really good open discussion going.
Well, thanks. And I appreciated those comments. I'm sitting here writing things down as he's talking. Talk more about these particular things that Cal brought up. And first thing that I like to point out to people is, and the Patriot groups tend to overemphasize this point. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. I should say this. I should say that our common law is as mysterious to most all people as is the doctrine of the Trinity. They talk about our common law. A lot of Patriot-type groups do, and the promoters of Patriot groups. They talk about it, but they never really get down to defining it. And the only way to define it is to do it as Cal has done and talk about history. It's impossible to understand our common law without understanding from whence it came, and it does not originate in Magna Carta. Magna Carta is like our Constitution. It's an attempt to reestablish common law. Of course, is a process. That's what it was. Well, that brings us to the point. Our common law is not, to define it, the first thing I think is best to say is what it's not. It's not a list of laws. Just as the Ten Commandments is not a list of do's and don'ts. Ten Commandments aren't even in the imperative mode. There's only one of the 10 that the Hebrew tongue puts in the imperative mode, and that's the fifth commandment, honor thy father and mother. And you can see even in the English that it's different. You know, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery, covet, lie. And those are future indicatives. They're statements from the viewpoint of the speaker, what will happen in the future. That's pretty good translation, infinitive absolutes. In the Hebrew, those are first principles of end results, sometimes called commands, but that confuses us too. But it is the end result that a lot of the Bible talks about. It is the end result that the law of the city talks about. The fundamental, draw the distinction, to try to say what is our common law, the fundamental difference, among a few fundamental differences, between our law of the land and the law of the city is that the law of the city is result-oriented. The law of the land is process-oriented. What do I mean when I say that? What I mean is this. Under the law of the city, which Cal had mentioned, merchant, admiralty, those are all different labels for the fundamentally same thing, as is also bureaucratic law, martial law applied to armies, admiralty law applied to ships on the high seas, bureaucratic law, administrative law. Those are fundamentally a martial kind of a law, and they're result-oriented. When a general officer of our military services tells a subordinate officer, I want that town secured, taken and secured, he doesn't tell him how to do it. He's interested in the end result. That's the martial feature of the law of the city. There's nothing wrong. In fact, there's everything right about martial law being applied to armies on fields of battle and admiralty law being applied to ships and men on ships at sea. That's right. But if it escapes that jurisdiction, that particular jurisdiction, and gets out to where it's governing us, as the King of England did, King and Parliament in England did to the American colonies, then freedom goes away. There is no freedom if you're under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, as it is said now in the United States, which is our martial law. And that martial law applies to the armed forces of the United States on land and sea. If you're under that, you don't have a lot of freedom. If somebody wants to come and search your goods, if you're a sailor on a ship, you don't have a right against unusual searches, unreasonable searches and seizures. You don't have a right of free speech if you're on a ship. You don't even have a right of free speech if you're on an airplane. That's admiralty jurisdiction. And admiralty jurisdiction is given to the the general government in Washington, D.C., and I like to tell patriot folks, too, they complain about the Admiralty flag in our federal courts. That's sensible that the Admiralty flag is in the federal courts. Why? Because the Constitution of the United States gives exclusive jurisdiction and admiralty to the federal courts. That's why you see those flags with the fringes in there. There's nothing wrong with that. Does the federal court have admiralty jurisdiction? Indeed it does. But it also has common law jurisdiction. And again, Erie Railroad, I spend my time trying to adjust the extreme positions of patriots. They're good, they're well-minded and they're sincere often, but they get caught up in things. Don't complain because federal courts have admiralty jurisdiction. The problem is federal courts apply admiralty principles in common law jurisdiction. In other words, when somebody brings a contract case in diversity jurisdiction of the federal courts, and then admiralty is applied. But the difference between the law of the land and the law of the city is, the fundamental difference, probably the biggest difference is, the law of the city is result-oriented. It's a martial kind of a law. And the law of the land is process-oriented. What does that mean? That means due process is not a part of our common law. No, due process is our common law. That's why the Bible says. The Bible is a book about the law of the land, put in particular language, and Jesus Christ doesn't say, I'm the law. He doesn't say, I'm the end result. He is the Alpha and the Omega. He is, no question. It covers it all, but he stresses this. He says, I am the way. I am the way. That word in the Greek tongue, odos, means road. In the Older Testament, it also uses the same phrase, the way. The Hebrew word derek, it means road, roadway. I'm the course you get on, and you stay on it. It is not do this or don't do that. It is, number one, how do you do it, as the English say, or used to say. I hope they still say it. It is not what you do and don't do. It's not what you do when you serve me. It is how you do it. How? And what's the first question that men must answer as to how to follow our common law? It is a course. Pilgrim's Progress is a good example of that, the best-selling book in the English-speaking world for centuries. There is a movie out about Pilgrim's Progress. That's about a man living the Christian life. He gets on a course, and he stays on the course. But it is how we do things, not what we do. Magna Carta speaks about, when it, in that chapter, that heading that talks about trial by one's peers, doesn't use the word jury, but that's what jury trial is. It's unique to the common law. It does not exist anywhere else in the world. The Code of Justinian knows nothing of trial by jury. Again, another feature of our common law. 12 men sworn to witness evidence. Jesus Christ did the same thing. He grabbed 12 men standing around to witness the evidence of his identity as Messiah. And they delivered their verdict, paid with their lives, all but one of them. John the Apostle, the only one that wasn't murdered for his honest verdict of who Jesus Christ is. But that number 12 is important in the Bible. It's important to us at common law. The jury has come from the north of Europe. It was practiced there until the times of Martin Luther. Of course, it came to Britain. But our common law is a way of life. It is not a list of do's and don'ts. The first question that a fellow must ask when he enters that course, as in Pilgrim's Progress, he found the wicket gate. He went in. The first question we must answer is, to whom do I pay respect? You don't come into court, lawyers go into court. Lawyers go into court because lawyers can't agree upon an external standard whereby to govern their relationships, common law lawyers. And every lawyer in the United States, by the way, except the state of Louisiana, and every lawyer in Canada except the province of Quebec, both of those jurisdictions are civil law jurisdictions because of the Roman Church influence there in the canon law, Quebec and Louisiana. But everywhere in Canada, everywhere in the United States, all lawyers in those countries are common lawyers, as it was anciently said, commoners, short for common lawyer. All the lawyers in the rest of the world are called civilians, civil lawyers. And they're result-oriented. It doesn't make any difference about a course of process. When you go into court in France, Germany, South America, Vietnam, the communist bloc countries, China, even Russia yet today, when you go into court, nobody says, well, let's concentrate on the process here and let the result take care of itself, as the Bible teaches. No, they say, what does the Code of Justinian say? What is the command of the legislative power of this government? That's the result we have to reach. Do we stop to consider how different we are in America. No, we go into court and we say, okay, let the fight begin. Let's fight it out. How do we do it? We do it according to the Queensberry rules. We box according to the rules. We don't sucker punch. We don't hit below the belt. We don't fight. We don't kick. We don't pull hair. No. It is trial, battle by trial, which is the reverse, the same thing, the mirror image of trial by battle, which was part of our common law tradition. And the same rules apply in our common law courts. They don't apply anywhere else in the world but the English-speaking world, fundamentally. By the way, there was one country in Africa that was a common law country. I didn't mention this a while ago when I listed all the countries. That was Liberia. Liberia was founded on the west coast of Africa by slaves from America. And they took back from America our common law. And it was a common law country until very recently. I think the communist forces and the persuasions and the sway of it have taken over there, from what I understand. But we're process-oriented. And the first step in the process is, when you go into court, you're fighting over what the external standard is that you govern your relationship with. How does it apply? You know what the external standard is, but the question is, how does it apply? And we go into court and we fight it out. The first question is, who's in charge of the court? The judge is in charge. That's why we say Your Honor. In Britain, they say His Grace. They say other things like that. As it pleases Your Honor, we'd say in America. They would say over there, as it pleases the court. Sometimes we say that. The first question is, just as with the Ten Commandments, what's the first question in life? Honor thy father and thy mother. If you can't do that, you're living lawlessly. Well, my father's a scoundrel. You still honor his memory, because if it wasn't for him, you wouldn't be here. And besides that, honor is not earned according to our common law. It's not earned according to our Bible, as is popularly said. That's one of the biggest, ugliest, most evil lies in our world today, that respect is earned. No, respect is because God said so, and that ends it. Honor thy father and thy mother. Honor all men. Love the brotherhood. Fear God. Honor the king, says the Apostle Peter. Honor him. Love is for the brotherhood. That's different. Agape. Honor, that's for everybody else. Mm-hmm. The difference between the two systems is one is process-oriented. The phrase, law of the land, lifted from Magna Carta, lex terra, put in the Article 6 of our Constitution. Clearly, again, our Supreme Court has acknowledged this in detail. That phrase, it was the phrase in the 13th century that meant, in our common law tradition, due process. And as I said a while ago, our common law does not include due process. Our common law is due process. It's a path we get on, a way we resolve our differences. The first question is, who do I show respect to here? And if you can't show respect to the judge, you can't show respect to the other fellow on the other side, you're not going to get anywhere. I don't go into court and I start out by telling the judge off. I know judges have been married 3, 4, 5 times. They've obviously got serious family problems. Then I get into court and I discover they're rude and they're abusive. They have no self-confidence, and so they try to put down lawyers in order to make themselves feel better. What does the Bible say? Honor them. Don't strike in like kind. By the way, if you do that, you're not going to even enter the process. You've got to enter due process at the gate. What's the gate? The wicket gate, as in Pilgrim's Progress. Get on the course. You enter with respect. When I go in front of an appellate court, it's tradition in our common law tradition. And they're even taught this at law school. Amazingly, we're still taught some right things. The first thing you say when you stand up is, may it please the court. I dare say most people that go through law school don't even know what that means. They still say it. We still have the forms of our common law. Let's don't lose them. A while ago, Cal was talking about the pie powder courts. Pie powder. And I like words. And if I can't get the meanings of words fundamentally, first of all, I have a hard time remembering what things mean. The pie powder courts are that way with me. Pie powder is a French word. It means, powder means dust, like dust on the road. And pie is their word for foot. Pedal is a root. Pedal has to do with the foot. Pie powder courts are the powder foot, the dusty foot courts. Dusty foot. Well, what does that mean? That means that the hucksters, they used to call them hucksters. We used to have hucksters at home. The huckster was a fellow that traveled around the countryside because the roads weren't that good, and it's hard to get to town, so the huckster would come around with all the goods. Sometimes they'd have a horse and wagon, then later on they had trucks, and they would sell you things. They'd sell pots and pans and clothing and even refrigerators. Sometimes they got the Hull and Ice and tin pans and everything, anything you want. If you couldn't want it, I had an aunt We called her Aunt Hattie. She wanted a Victrola. A Victrola. That's one of the things you crank up and you put a record on the top. And I remember them from when I was a boy. But she told her huckster, "Bring me a Victrola. I want one. I'm going to purchase it. Tell me what it costs." And of course, he got a hold of it at the Sears store in town and brought it out to her. Well, that's what a huckster is. And the pie powder courts were the courts that were for hucksters in England. They had the same kind of men there. They traveled around. And then they came from the continent of Europe. Those were civil law jurisdictions, law of the city. And they'd come there, and they didn't know what to do. Now, Cal had mentioned a while ago, he had mentioned the courts. And what they ended up doing in these pie powder courts were courts that were under what they called the law merchant. It was an attempt to merge, to make things fast, because these merchants would come from far away, and they wanted to settle their differences before they took the 4 or 5 day journey back to their home on Britain, or the journey back across the ocean. And Britain wanted that trade from the continent, and if they didn't treat those guys right, they wouldn't come back. They were bringing goods to them that they wanted, that were different than what they could produce. And so they had these free trade zones, so to speak, the staple courts and the staple towns, as Cal was talking about. And then the question came, how do we use the common law? Well, they even got to, and Justice Mansfield was the one I remembered. He's called the father of the Uniform Commercial Code. How do we get quick justice in places where you go into these zones, these staple towns, they call them? How do we get quick justice there so the merchants can get justice, get out, and go home, and come back later with more goods? Well, in America, we've struggled with the same thing. We have 50 jurisdictions, people doing trade back and forth between these states that are separate sovereignties, have different laws. How can we make things fast and quick? And so now, when I was in law school, the Uniform Commercial Code was, the states had not all adopted it, maybe less than half. And now I understand all the states have adopted it in various forms, but pretty much alike. And it's a design for quick commercial transactions. What the Uniform Commercial Code has tried to do is take the principles of the common law and streamline them so contracts can be resolved quickly in court. And if you submit to the Uniform Commercial Code, which also it's common law of contracts and promises applied to merchants that want to move quickly and get justice quickly. That's what it is. And if you're not a merchant, by the way, and you don't sell cars for a living, or you don't sell luxury ocean yachts for a living, you're just selling your car off the front yard or out of your drive, that doesn't apply to you. The Uniform Commercial Code is only for merchants. That's an important concept. But they got to in England saying, well, they've got these guys in the continent that speak French and Bulgarian and Flemish. So they had what they called the juries of the half-tongue. This was Justice Mansfield's day. They used to do this. And Justice Mansfield was a Scotsman. And by the way, his family were Jacobites. They supported the French Revolution. Mansfield, his name was Murray, but they knighted him and made him a justice. But he came up with this idea of having juries of merchants. They wanted to keep the jury, but they wanted a jury of men that understood commercial transactions. So he impaneled a jury of merchants, and these merchants would sit as a jury. Then they had the jury of the half-tongue. They tried that for a while, where, well, you speak French, and we'll have 6 men on the jury that speak English and 6 men that speak French. Now, this doesn't work, by the way, this half-tongue jury business, because the Bible says, and this is the principle of the law of God, which is the principle of the law of the land. It's not called the law of the land for nothing. It's called the law of the land because it's a law that governs everything within a jurisdictional boundary of land. And God says in the Bible, when you go into the land of Canaan, the promised land, you will have one law, one, and it will apply to everybody within the jurisdictional boundaries of your land. And if you don't do that, it's overwhelmingly confusing. Our common law says do that, and we must do that in America, and I hope they do it in Canada. But
okay, Brent, we're going to pause for a break at this point, and then when we come back on the other side, I really want to get into solutions, and I want to talking together so that we can maybe create some solutions to these problems.
You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
There was a mighty nation, blessed above all of creation. It was a rare and precious pearl, conceived in faith and liberty, home of the brave, land of the free. It was the envy of the world. But this shining city on a hill has turned from the Creator's will and let evil take control. Now the reckless men who lead them want to strip away their freedom and to steal their very soul. Now it's smoke and mirrors, switching bait, criticize and confiscate and let the guilty walk away. In this once righteous, godly nation, in the halls of education, they forbid a child to pray. They say we need to spread the wealth. They pretend to guard the health of the feeble and the poor, while the hand they hold behind their backs confuses and conceals the fact that the wolf is at the door. There's an unseen hand.
Well, welcome back to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel, and today my guests on the radio program are Brent Allen Winters and Cal Washington. And we've gotten a terrific historical background on how this legal system works in the United States, at least what the fundamental principles are. And I want to get into a discussion about how to work in the system that we have and get justice, and how that process can work. Before I get back into that, I want to mention the fact that I have a new sponsor. 7K Metals has been a sponsor of this for the last month and a half, and to make people aware of what is going on. I think most of the people, of our listeners anyway, understand that our country is going through an enormous change, and our financial system is a real disaster. And I'd like to mention the fact that 7K Metals is a group that sells precious metals at a wholesale price. And what we are doing, I'll just do my quote on this: are you prepared for the upcoming economic collapse and currency reset? Right now, the stock market is setting at historic highs, but how much longer can this last? The 2008 banking crisis nearly brought down the whole world financial system and only managed to kick the can down the road a few years by saddling American taxpayers with trillions. That was 11 years ago, and national and personal debt levels are much worse today than they were in 2008, pushing us to the point where the dollar is nearly worthless. Gold and silver have been the true money for thousands of years, and we need to, it may be the only asset class left standing when the inevitable global financial collapse happens. So what we need to do, we need to understand this is insurance. You buy insurance for your car, your home, and your life to prepare for life's mishaps. Why not purchase some insurance for the inevitable world financial meltdown, especially if that insurance is better than money in the bank and available at wholesale prices? Supporting Connecting the Dots, these groups will help us, and if you support Connecting the Dots and ensure your financial survival by joining me at my danhappel.com site and click on the 7K Metals icon to learn more about a program that could be the best financial insurance policy in America. This is a group that is very much like Costco. You pay a fee to sign up to join this group, and you can buy precious metals at wholesale prices that are the best prices in the country. And this is a great program, and you can support this radio show if you will go to that site and find out more about that group and consider signing up. So with that, I want to get back to the discussion. Brent, we had a pretty good idea of where the commercial code all ties in with the common law. Cal talked about that in some detail as well. And I guess the point is that we ended up with the court system that we've got, which is based on commercial code or Justinian law because of expediency. So, Cal, I want to start this second hour with you explaining how that has turned into corporate structure. I know at Empower you do a visual on there that shows the individual and the various layers. You do it in going from the individual out to how that court system really is self-reinforcing. And I wanted to add one to that. You show the federal government and the American system as being the outside of that, and I have to say that I know for a fact that the UN and world government is attempting to be the next layer on the outside, and with that we will have total control of virtually everything we do by a system that's perverted. So Cal, comment on that, and let's see if we can get this discussion moving.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that is the goal, and that's written in the Bible. It's called Babylon, and they want to have a world system based on these country-type systems. So, as Brent brought up some of the history, so what they've done, because now that the law merchant is in the common law court, more or less hidden, the UCC does have some visual there, and there is some codes there, but still, it's still the same process. And what I found when I started to learn commerce and the process was it was a mirror image of biblical principles. And the main one that I saw was you were supposed to settle with your brother on the way to court. So the common law court, as Brent brought up, is a little more adversarial especially in commercial things. It's more argumentative. They would, like, you bring forth arguments. The commercial system was based on settling and more about agreeing. So what you would do is you would conditionally agree. And if you don't do that, you almost automatically lose because you go into what's called dishonor. So, and because people don't understand that, and I didn't understand that, I was losing because I was argumentative. And I didn't understand that. So the minute I saw what it was and started to operate in commerce purely, that's when I got different results. And so how this works and why it works is because now they've hidden the commercial lex mercatoria, that whole jurisdiction, inside the common law and not told anybody. Then they turned us all into merchants, and how they did that was through the birth certificate process. The minute you register anything, people have to understand this too. The root word of register is regi, and you just need to look that up, and it'll dawn on you what you've done. So that means giving over to the king. And so what they've done is they made everybody register their children, and that created what's called a straw man or a corporation, and that corporation is what they're dealing with, but they're dealing with it in lex mercatoria. And that's where the problem is, and that's what people are feeling. They think it's admiralty, and it's not quite admiralty. It's actually law merchant. You're a merchant. You're considered a merchant. You're considered as doing business, and your merchant number is your SSN number in the United States. Here we have an SIN number. But your SSN number is, you'll notice, you almost have to put it on anything you do. Like if you want to go get a driver's license, what's your SSN number? You want to open a bank account, what's your SSN number? You want to file a tax return, what's your SSN number? That number is your merchant number. That's how they know that you are in the system and that they can treat you as a merchant. So instead of fighting that, what I've done is, okay, if I'm a merchant, I'm going to act like a merchant. I'm going to learn what the rules are, and I'm going to engage you as merchant to merchant. That's when my life changed. And so what we've done with the Empower movement is we've turned, because everybody's a merchant, and it's really difficult to teach everybody how to get out of the system. It's overwhelming to try and learn all of this stuff and then make the moves to get out, and it's not convenient. So most people were resistant to even do it. So what I did was, if everybody's a merchant, I'm just going to write a document that is in merchant law. It's in law merchant, and it works on the basis of conditional acceptance in a contract. And you can do this with almost everything, because everything ends up being commercial in some way. It's the Babylonian system. So what we've done is, say on the smart meter issue, we conditionally accept your meter. And what we're saying is, I will take your meter, your offer of a meter, if you can prove it is safe. If you can't prove it is safe, then you will owe me X amount of dollars per day to have this meter on my house, in my meter base. It's really simple. That's sort of the simplistic view of it. So what happens is they can't get out of it, because this is their hidden system. And if you understand principalities and rulers and all that whole scope of things, this is the system that whole thing operates under. And what I did in court, I did the same thing. I basically said, I see your summons. I will conditionally accept, and your summons always has show up at court on this date, blah, 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 unless you have a lawful excuse. And people don't understand what that means. So I did a lawful process, and I said, I will come to your court. I agree that I will come, but on the condition that you can prove that you have some authority over me, and you need to be able to prove that. You have 30 days. If you don't prove that, I'm not coming. That is my lawful excuse. And that's a commercial process. So that's how you operate in this thing, rather than try and fight it at this point. And what I found was I got way more success operating in the system than I did trying to fight it. And when I looked at the system, it was really based on biblical principles. It was like technically, and that's one thing about the enemy. He's very technical, and he's the accuser of the brethren and all that stuff. So it was following biblical principles, but because of our ignorance of what's happened, we were being taken advantage of because we weren't responding in the correct way. And unless you knew that, you're going to argue, you're going to fight, you're going to resist, you're going to try and get away from it. And what I found in my own experience, once I understood what it was, I started to deal with it as it is, and then the results were 180 degrees different. They were running from me instead of me running from them. And so we've taken that everything that I learned in my own journey out, and we've applied it to smart meters, forced vaccinations, geoengineering, and 5G. And what we found is all of these things, they're basically weapon systems for end times, for those that understand biblical, the biblical epoch that we're in. It's a weapon system, but they're putting it up commercially. This is not standing armies moving weapons. This is all like Verizon and pharmaceutical companies it's all commercial, so we can deal with them in commerce. And commerce is done based on the old Lex Mercatoria, which they've hidden inside our common law system, and even into the civil law system, the Roman system. It's in there too. And so that's basically the remedy of how to deal with this thing. And you can see the evidence of this in Revelation 18, verse 6, where it says, take the cup. It describes Babylon. The whole chapter does. But there's two commands in there. One is come out of her, and the other one is take the cup that she's been giving you, fill it double, and hand it back. And that is what we're following. So the cup that she's been handing us is commerce, and they've enslaved us through this commercial system, through our ignorance. And if we understood how it works, it would self-correct. And that's the part that a lot of people don't understand. It is technically a sound system, and it worked very well for the merchants historically. But if you take that system and you use it against people who are not merchants, or at least don't understand that they're merchants, then that's how you can take advantage, and that's what's happened.
Okay, that's a terrific segue into Brent. I want you and Cal talking to each other on this radio show, because it's a fascinating look at how the legal system has changed. And Cal, I understand exactly what you're saying. The best way is to use that system against them. Maybe it'll break them from sucking eggs. So with that, let's Brent, I'll talking about the ways to make this whole system work to the advantage of the good people out there, the innocent people out there who have been screwed by the system.
Yes. Well, that made me giggle because I hadn't heard that in a while, but we all knew at home when I was growing up what an egg-sucking dog was. And once a dog gets to suck an egg, you can't stop them. And they'll clean. If you're in the chicken business or in the egg business, and everybody was at that time to varying small degrees, we were. If we had an egg-sucking dog, you just had to shoot them. That's all you could do. Mm-hmm. They'd put you out of business. But that's what we've got. And some people call them parasites. As the Bible says, the horse leech has two daughters. Give and give. That's it. And just keep giving more till they suck you dry. And as we used to go out and try to get the lice out of hogs' ears, lice would get into their ears, and it would kill them if we didn't get it out. And we lived in the oil field, so there was always a lot of crude oil around. We'd take an old coffee can, piece of baling wire, put the coffee can on the end of a sapling pole, dip it in a bucket of crude oil, get the hogs crowded up into a corner, and we would pour oil in their ears. And we'd pour it in, and then they'd flop their ears, and then we'd pour some more in, and it would kill the lice. And I remember doing this as a boy, 10, 12, 14 years old, with my father, and asking him questions about it. And he said to me one time, he said, now you've got to understand that a parasite will always destroy its host. A parasite will always destroy its host if given the opportunity. It will suck you dry until you're dead, and then it will go to the next victim. And that's what lice do, that's what the horse leech does, and that's what bankers do in America. Bankers are sucking us dry. Isn't it funny? We go to towns, little towns all over America, big towns. You can go to a little town that is economically dilapidated. The courthouse square has no businesses around them. The businesses are boarded up. I've been to a lot of little towns like that. But you find the bank building in town, and it's a beautiful new building or a refurbished building because the banker has money. He has lots of money. Why? Because usury allows that to him. Usury. The Bible forbids it. Jesus Christ forbade it. It was called the scourge of humanity for centuries in Europe, and now we're back at it again. It will destroy us. All of these things are wrong, but getting back to the remedy, Cal, I'll address you, Cal, because Dan tried to remind me he wanted to get a dialogue going, and I glad that you brought up the concept of the birth certificate and how that, you believe, has become something that is a commercial instrument. And I couldn't help but notice, I talked about due process, and you talk about process. And then I said, I thought I heard him say, he was from Canada at one time in your life, but you say process, and I say process, but I thought maybe that was a giveaway. I try to pay attention to words, but this this whole thing about this birth certificate, and then you brought up, now isn't it fascinating too, Cal? See, folks that are tuned in to truth are tuned in to words. To varying degrees, to the degree you're tuned into truth, you're tuned into what a word means. So you mentioned register, and you said that register, the root of register, is regis. And then you said, look it up. See what that means. Regis, of course, is an old word that has to do with royalty and the king. And you pointed out that regis has to do with registering with the king. Registering what? Well, a tax return would be a good example. You give a return of information. It's an information return. Every time money changes hands, the government says, you got to tell us about it. Just as the Pharaoh in Egypt said to the people of Egypt, and the people of Egypt, the Israelites that were down there that time, they said, yeah, we'll do that. We'll provide you a return of every financial transaction we do. Go read Genesis. It's all in there. That was the system that Joseph had put in place called income tax. These things are not new. We're just struggling with them because they're new to us. But the evil empire and the law of the city, the law, which is the law of Babylon, that's the place it was first organized, presses in on us. What do we do about it? Here's what I suggest we do, Cal, and I'm sure you're struggling with this, you're wrestling with it. As a dog wrestles with a bone. I am too. What do we do? What does a man do? People ask me. I say this. I say go to the Bible and do what the Bible says. Do it in your individual life. Do it in your home. The government of God. We're talking about the kingdom of God, the basileia of the New Testament. The kingdom of God is the way God has arranged jurisdictions and responsibilities. That's what jurisdiction is. And he tells us, for instance, in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, why are you dragging each other before the courts of the evil empire, the courts of Rome, under the Roman law, to become later the Code of Justinian? Why are you doing that? You've got men that can make judgments. Grab men standing around and impanel the jury, says Paul the Apostle. You want to know how, this is the clash we're having, Cal, the way I see it. We're having a clash between the law of, this dispels the history of mankind, the law of Babylon, the law of the city, and the law of the land. And we see that division in our own country. The urban areas now all go for one presidential candidate, and the rural areas all go for another. That's never changed. It's been that way throughout history. They're doing the same thing in China. They call the people that live out in the countryside, I've talked to people from China, they call them the equivalent of what we would say bumpkins and idiots and presumptive sillies, country folk. They're just stupid. And they're trying to persuade, they're building cities in China, trying to persuade all the people to move into the cities so they can control them. It's not working as well as they wanted. They tried the Romans tried the same thing on the Isle of Britain when they invaded and took over Britain, what is now England. They didn't go up into Scotland, but they built cities. And they tried to persuade the Anglo-Saxons, the Celts, and the Danes to come into the cities and live. They were complete with sewer systems, baths, paved roads, all of the beautiful hedonistic things that Rome could provide, but these people would not move into the cities, therefore Rome could not take over. We see the same thing in our own country. You don't want to be controlled by the government? The Amish people have this figured out in America, Cal. I don't know how that is up, but are you in Canada now, Cal, or are you down here?
I live in Canada. I'm actually what's considered a dual citizen. I'm using that word loosely.
Got it.
Yeah.
And you're in Toronto, I heard you say then, right?
No, I'm in Vancouver on the West Coast.
Oh, I'm familiar with that neck of the woods. I've been out there a lot. Used to live up in Bremerton, and we go into Vancouver once in a while.
Okay. Yeah.
But I know that part of the country. Beautiful, boy. To go into Vancouver, shockingly. I was shockingly surprised at the overwhelming view of the mountains once you get there.
Yeah.
Beautiful city.
Beautiful spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but they're persuading us. They're trying to persuade us into what happens? Tyranny. The definition of tyranny is this way I'm seeing it, Cal, and then I'll stop for a while. There's more to say than I can say, and I can tell you the same way. But the tyranny is when the law of the city extends its terror, and that's where we get the word territory. It's terror out across the territory outside of the city. That's what's happening. Las Vegas controls the state of Nevada. Los Angeles, San Diego, and the Bay Area now control the state of California, a great agricultural state, by the way. And they're denying them water. They're controlling the agriculture of the state. They're sucking like a leech. Illinois has got the same problem. Nevada has the same problem. Texas is now being taken over by the policies of the law of the city extending out across the hinterland. That's why God says in Babylon, and all through the Bible, the whole theme of the Bible is the law of the land, the law of Babylon, which is a result-oriented system, and the will of man and the law of the city. One more thing, Cal, I want to mention. You talked about birth certificates. I'm glad you brought it up. Birth certificates are regis, as you said, registering with the government. We offer the common lawyer's Bible, or they call it the winterized version of the Bible, and in the back of that, I put where you can register birth, death, and marriage, and land transfer, because records of birth and marriage and death all have to do with land transfer. That's why you go to the courthouse and register these things. But it's up to us to not trust the government to register our birth. It's up to us to keep track of those. They're important for reason of land inheritance and land rights. But we should do it ourselves. Traditionally in America and traditionally in the English-speaking world, the family Bible was where you did that.
Correct.
And the family Bible was important. I remember people having family Bibles. I don't hear about the family Bible anymore. But in most states of our union, Cal, the family Bible are common law, and there's even statutes that have been passed in a lot of the states stating the common law principle that records of family Bibles are good evidence, creating a rebuttable presumption, but a presumption of truth, unless it can be rebutted, of birth and death and marriage, which have to do with land rights. And so I want, this is a personal ambition I have, and I try to attach the Bible to it because the Bible is a precise statement of the law of the land, and we offer what people call the winterized version of the Bible. I call it the good book. A common lawyer translates and annotates the Bible. But in the back, we include an area, a place, pages where you can record those things, and that's good evidence at common law in most every state in our country. Back to you, Cal.
Yeah, I agree. And every time I go to a wedding now, that's my gift. I give a family Bible, and I go around to the pastor, and I get him to sign it, and I get the maid of honor, etc., to sign it. So what has happened? Like even in those processes, they're just copying that process, I guess. So I don't give myself away.
No, I like process. That gets my attention.
but when you go to a wedding, just next time you go to a wedding, watch, just feel how it is. Everything is really nice. There's a flow to things, and then there's this bump. It doesn't fit. It just feels awkward, and that's when they sign the government registration form. And you'll see it all the time, and you'll see the whoever's the pastor or the preacher, whoever's giving the wedding, watch what order they say when they pronounce the wedding. They'll say, by the power vested in me in the state of blah blah blah, and then God, afterwards. And these things are all subtle things of how they've usurped what's happened. And as far as the Bible goes, I have a friend who didn't register his child. She's about 5 years old now. And he went through the process of trying to get her a passport so that she could cross the border into Canada. He was Canadian and was living in the United States. And the Bible held. He couldn't get it in Seattle, but once he escalated to Washington, D.C., all of a sudden a passport showed up. Because the Bible, they had to honor that recording of the birth. And as Brent said, this is still really happening. And people need to go back to that. Instead of having your marriage have the government involved with it, keep it before the people that are there to witness, and God, and the couple, and then the two witnesses. And the two witnesses is, again, a whole biblical principle. Everything is confirmed on 2 or 3 witnesses. And even in our
Okay, now,
liability-
gentlemen, I hate to break in, but we do have a commercial break. Let's pick it up on the other side.
Okay.
Well, welcome back to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel, and we're having a fascinating discussion today with two gentlemen who I think really get it and really understand the process our legal system has evolved into and why it is failing our citizens, why it is destroying our society by taking advantage of the average man to the advantage of the ruling class. And so we're going to try to finish this discussion in the last half hour with a lot of good ideas and good solutions to that problem. I just want to remind our listeners again to that go to our website, danhappel.com, to archive shows. Please go to that site and click on the 7K Medals tab on there and find out more about 7K Medals, because if you work with them, if you subscribe to their program, we do have a benefit. I get a benefit from that as a sponsor of my radio program, and I can tell you we need the support, because we need to expand this program. We need to expand our listenership. The more we can do with that, the more people hear the truth. And so with that, Cal, I want to go back to you, because you were talking about the system. You and Brent clearly understand this. And I have a friend by the name of Jim Carlson, who's been on this radio show as well, who has learned that same thing. Is the best way to beat the system is to use their own regulations and make them abide by the same rules that they make us abide by. And when, in fact, you do that, it pretty much shuts them down, because the one thing they don't want to do is work really, really hard. And if you make them abide by the same rules they make us abide by, that represents work, and it becomes more difficult for them. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to you, and then I want you and Brent to carry this program for the next half hour.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, what Jim is saying is basically in line with Revelation 18, and I found that to be the truth. Is if I use the system against the system, it kind of has to obey, and the judges were, of course, the front line of this whole system. And if you use certain processes, they end up taking responsibility for the whole system, and they really don't want to sit in that spot. So what end up happening, and we've tried this over and over, is cases would just disappear off the docket, or they would come up with an excuse as to why they want to shut the case down. And some of these cases are not cases that the government would normally drop. And so we really did catch on to what you need to do in order to prevail, for lack of a better word, but to get them to leave you alone. And it really came down to using the system against the system. And that's what we're doing at Empower. And if you start to read the Bible, and especially Revelation 18, you can see that if you feed the system its own stuff, it will disintegrate. It will it's like that snake that eats its own tail. And so that's what we're doing, and I really do believe that that's our clue as to what to do from the Most High God, and things will happen in order to bring this system down. And if you read the rest of Revelation 18, it crashes very fast, and then it is no more. And this is the last incarnation of it, according to Daniel. And there was the four different versions of the statue of Babylon, and this last the last incarnation is the clay mixed with iron, and the two don't mix. And it explains that the clay is men and women, because we are from the earth. And so then the iron is something that is not men and women, and they don't really cleave together, and something comes and chips the men and women off of this iron structure, and the whole thing collapses. And so that's what we're basically following for those that understand biblical strategies and the stories that are there. And so that is our solution. We're following biblical instructions, put it that way.
Okay. Brent,
Yes.
start in on this list. I really want
All
you
right.
guys to get to know each other really well, because I think you could be tremendously helpful to one another.
Well, Cal uses that analogy from Daniel, and so he got started. I'll continue with that. The clay and the iron are the feet of this idol, and the clay, I think he's right. It represents us, mankind, mixed, as it were. The reciprocal. It's in Aramaic there. That's one of those Aramaic portions of the Old Testament, and the verb there is in the reciprocal form. That means it's mixing back and forth. And the clay and the iron, the clay represents man. The iron, I believe, and I have it on my studied opinion. I won't say I know for sure, but it's my studied opinion. I'm fully convinced that the iron, always in the Bible, the iron represents Rome. And the Roman legions were called the Iron Legions of Rome, the enforcers of the policies of the evil empire. And you say, well, there's good things about the evil empire. Oh, yeah, Mussolini made the trains run on time. Adolf Hitler made Germany the wonder of the world during the 1930s. 1938, he was Man of the Year on the cover of Time magazine in America, or Newsweek, I think it was Time, because he really his policies made Germany a prosperous place. They went from the bottom of the economic heap to the top. We didn't. They did. They did it. How'd they do it? Well, they put one man in charge, and everybody had to do what he said. Mussolini did the same thing. But that will come to an end. It can't last. It would have been good, I suppose. It was started out that way, and then they had reverted and taken power away from. Freedom is expensive. It's not always convenient, and it's sometimes dangerous. But the alternative to our common law, which is the producer of freedom, the allower of freedom, the alternative is unthinkable. We don't want to go there. We take it slow and sure-footed. But this whole idea about Daniel tells the story of what's going to happen. We're going to win. We don't fight to win. We fight because Jesus Christ has already won. We fight in victory. All we're doing, we're like that fellow that was behind Jonathan in the Bible when Jonathan scaled the cliffs and attacked the Philistines that were making fun of him. And his armor bearer was behind him. He said, are you there? He said, yeah, just like your own heart. I'm your own will. I'm your own desire. I'm right behind you. And the armor bearer then, as Jonathan whooped in terminal fashion, slaughtered these fellows. He just came along behind and finished them off. That's all we're doing. We're coming along behind and finishing them off because the victory is already won. But we have a book that tells us how to do that. Now, if you go to the book of Acts, for example, you can see there the example of what it means to live in the world and not be of it, to come head on with the evil empire. Jesus Christ did the same thing. And he'd say to the Pharisees of his day, the Pharisees, the votaries of Babylonian Judaism, the prototype of evil in the world, the prototype of the law of the city. Rabbis even say yet today, well, no, the Talmud is scholastic. It's scholasticism. It is the law of the city. It is bureaucratic law. Jesus Christ went head on with those fellas. And he said to them, you fellas have regulations that make void the law of God. Well, isn't that what regulations do in America? They make void the first principles of our common law. Answer, yes. We go to court and we talk about silly details of regulations, of law made by executive branches of government that contrary to our common law, our Constitution says all legislative power is in the Congress of the United States on the national level, state level, same thing. But now we're letting the bureaucratic agencies make laws. They call them regulations. They're telling us, and the Congress is saying, oh yeah, those are all laws too, and the courts are saying those are laws. Well, Jesus Christ said that's the Pharisees. Nothing's changed. We have a book that tells us how to deal with them. He says, you fellows make void the law of God, but you fellows say everyone else has to follow these regulations that you've added to the Bible that trump the Bible, that make the Bible just fade into the background. You don't even care about that. You care about your Babylonian Judaism. And you take that and tell people they must do it and give them penalties for not doing it, but you yourselves won't lift one finger to do any of it. It's no secret. Read the articles. In America, Cal, IRS agents are the worst violators of the administrative code called the IRS Code of Regulations and the IRS Code. They're the ones nobody checks on. They demand everyone else do it, but they themselves living like animals that way. Well, that's the problem. How do we fight that? Jesus Christ says, number one, you say it to them. You use words. You say, well, if this, then that. That's what you fellows are. You're all scholastics, like St. Thomas Aquinas. You want to put reason above law, reason above the will of the sovereign, and say you can find the truth with reason. You can't. So I'll use reason here, just real quick, simple. If A equals B, and if how does that go in the syllogism? Dan, you're somewhat of an engineer, I think. If A equals B and C equals B, then A equals C. I think that's the way it goes. Simple stuff. Logic is not complicated. Is that right? Okay. So he said that to them, showed them how stupid it all was, made them exceedingly angry. They wanted to murder him. He let them murder him. He said, I put my life down, I take it up, but he let them do it. But they wanted to. And they used the evil empire to do it to make it look like they weren't the ones that did it. But they were the ones that did it, and the evil empire was a ready idiot to do it, the Rome itself. But then he turned around and said, but here's the truth. You have heard it said unto you, Sermon on the Mount. You have heard it said, and he quotes the Babylonian Judaism, the regulations. But I'll give you the straight interpretation of my law. I'm the true lawgiver. I'm God reduced to the span of a man. And here's what I meant by what I said, not what these fellows say. Well, that's what the courts are saying to us today. They're saying that, oh, no, the common law right against unreasonable searches and seizures of our Fourth Amendment, it doesn't mean what it says. You've got to attach all these other regulations and these other policies of the law of the city on top of it. Cal, in America, about 10, 12 years ago, I forget the date, a woman became dean of Harvard Law School. This same woman, well, I use the term loosely because they tell me she can't look between her legs and even decide what she's good for. In other words, any more than a sodomite can. She is a lesbian. But she was dean of Harvard Law School, and what did she do? She eliminated the required first-year common law courses that law schools in the English-speaking world have been teaching for generations. The law of contracts, for example, the common law of property, the law of the land. Remove those as required and substituted the law of the city, principles from what they call now in legal community international law. And when it happened, there was a firestorm. Internet was operative at that time, and graduates of Harvard and other law professors were discussing whether that was a good idea, Is it any accident that she is sexually confused and evil in her promotion of lesbianism and homosexuality? Yes, that's relevant. That's relevant because it shows bias and prejudice. And a common law of evidence, a bias and prejudice are always relevant. But I think we've hit on something. I get too far afield, Cal. This thing about the birth certificate, and it's encouraging to me to hear that you're into that idea about we need to keep our own records. You give people a family Bible. That's where I've landed. In Britain, there are patriots there. I'm on the radio in Britain, and I end up talking to a few people, and they have the same idea. They recently had my friend tell me over there they held a conference in Nottingham. And I think they did it, he said, on purpose to talk about, to emphasize, of course, Nottingham has a reputation from the 12th century. People like Robin Hood of Locksley and the Sheriff of Nottingham and King John Lackland trying to register everybody, sold his whole country out to the Islamic Sultan of Morocco, the Pope of Rome, and the Jewish moneylenders of his own country. He did it for money. He wanted their money. He wanted a loan on usury. He said that the Pope could own England. He said that the Islamic Sultan could have all of England, and he'd make it all Islamic. If these fellows said, if you loan us the money, the Jewish moneylenders of England, you can see this in Magna Carta. I'm not just pulling this stuff out. This is the history of the matter. Magna Carta cites the Jewish moneylenders and what to do with them, because the moneylenders in England were allowed to loan money. No one else was. Usury was against the law. But the king wanted the money, so he knew they had the money. They had gathered the money because of usury. And Magna Carta addresses all these things. Magna Carta occurred because of the law of the city. It was pressing upon the landowners, and they knew that John sold them out. America, we're facing the same problem here. And there are three religions that have arisen to preeminence in the world, Islam being one of them. That was a problem during the times of Magna Carta. Romanism, the law of the city, the canon law of Rome, the idea that men commit themselves to a foreign emperor called the Pope of Rome. That's a problem. It was a problem in England. It's a problem today. The problems don't change. We have the same problems. The question is, what do we do about it? History gives us the answers. Our Declaration of 76. Back to you, Cal.
Yeah, good. I want Cal to weigh in on solutions, because Cal, you've come to solutions. Go ahead.
Yeah, again, I just kind of use the system against the system based on what I read in Revelation verse 6, and then what I saw in Daniel, as Brent brought out. And what we're trying to create with Empower is that thing that comes and ships away. And what I noticed in my personal journey is, as I was doing processes in commerce, is people in high positions in government were leaving their office. So that's the chipping away, from my point of view, in my opinion. And I saw this over and over, and then we've seen this same thing happen when we started to do the smart meters in 3 cities, is people were stepping down. They're getting away from the Babylonian system, or the iron as it's described in the Bible. And so I think this is our solution, is to follow that. We're using the 4 sort of matters that are happening at this point in time that are definitely deadly and getting the attention of people finally. And as they step into courts and they try and do petitions or class action suits, they're finding that those things are not available for the most part. And they're wondering why, because they thought there was this, our judicial or a legal system that was based in the common law, but it's not like that. And when people are starting to wake up and try and figure out what's going on, and light bulbs start to go off if they see, what I explain about the jurisdictions and how we've all contracted into all these things, unknowingly, albeit, but we have agreed to all this. And so it's a matter of either unagreeing with it, and that's a long, drawn-out process, and life becomes inconvenient, or just use the system against the system and feed it to itself. And that's what's written in the Bible, and so that's what we're promoting, that's what we're teaching. And I think we're going to get the results. The results will be that the system will collapse under its own, because you're feeding it to it. So it really comes down to this idea of money and using that against them. As Brent brought out, pretty much everything is about money. And, going back to King John, it's about money, money, money. And the money lenders just print it out of nothing and, of course, want the principal back plus interest. And the interest is not available, like it doesn't exist, and therefore you have this escalating debt, and it's a backward system. But that all said, what we're doing is using the money system against itself. So if you can't prove that I owe you or that you can do this to me or force this upon me, if you can't prove that you have actual authority to do so, then you will owe me money, quote unquote money. And that's what makes them pay attention, because it's a money-based system.
Okay. Yeah, and you have used this in vaccination, in smart meters. To talk about some of the ways that you see this this system being used against them, in, as you say, the snake eating its own tail. How that process can be expanded into literally everything we do.
Yeah, we haven't started the vaccination one. We've had one man in California do the process by himself because his daughter wasn't allowed at school, and it caused quite a kerfuffle. And the lawyer that was handling it, she stepped down or was removed or whatever. A new lawyer stepped in. Somebody on the receiving end sent the documents to risk management. So they were feeling that this was actually real, even though the rhetoric from the lawyer was, there's no basis in law for what you're doing. But I know better because I know where Lex Mercatoria got put into the common law, and I know that they're using it. So this rhetoric doesn't dissuade me, and plus I've seen in my own experience too many things that prove that that's what's going on. So we don't have the vaccine one available yet, but we've run the smart meter one in 3 cities, 2 in the United States and 1 in Canada. And then we've had various people go partway through the process, and we've seen the same results: people stepping down, disappearing, that kind of thing. So there is a validity to it because the body language or the results speak for themselves, and people get out of the way. Not everybody, but it seems to be the higher up in the, their pyramid structure of this world domination thing. The higher up that they are, it seems like the more knowledge they have, and then it becomes more real to them. And not that it's not real; it's just they understand it. And people on the lower end of things tend not to have knowledge of it. So that's basically where we're at. We're in the process of moving towards 5G, the vaccinations, and the geoengineering, the spraying in the sky and all that. But right now we have the smart meter one available.
Okay, good. Well, I'm very quickly, we're running out of time here. Very quickly, I want you to state your website, how people can learn more about you at your website, and then I want to get Brent in so that he can talk about some of his books.
Okay. We're at inpowermovement.com, and we have a help desk there. You can ask questions. You can sign up. We are now moving. We just started in the UK. There's a group working out of Belgium, Netherlands, France. A small group just started in South Africa. So we're kind of going worldwide. We're getting beyond the idea of countries and dealing with this problem at the source of it, and that is much deeper than the idea of countries and that type of thing. It goes into principalities, powers, rulers, and that I'm sure some of the listeners and definitely Brent understands. So yeah.
Yeah, very good. Okay, Brent, very quickly, tell people about where they can find your books on Amazon and how they can look at your site.
Thank you, Dan. And I appreciate and I'm encouraged by the guest you had on with me today. And I'm hoping we can have more intercourse together, discussion about such things. My name is Brent Allen Winters. My website is www.commonlawyer.com. That's commonlawyer, LAWYER.com. And you can go to there and find a description of my books. Chief among those is a common lawyer, the good book, the Bible. A common lawyer translates from the original tongues and annotates the Bible with almost 15,000 footnotes and detailed headnotes to each of the Bible's 66 books and 112 appendices, detailed appendices, tracing major themes throughout the 66 books. And you can find the other books, Excellence of the Common Law, Comparative Law Text of 958 pages, comparing the law of the land and the law of the city. The two major, only really two, legal traditions of religion, law, and government in the world. There are only two, and everyone in every nation is tending either toward the one or toward the other. And then also a book on the Fourth Amendment, the right against unreasonable search and seizure, jury duty, don't talk to police, another booklet there. You can get a blow-by-blow commentary on the Constitution of the United States and the Declaration of 76, short and sweet, and then 30 hours of lecture, clause by clause, blow by blow, audio lecture on Magna Carta. Those are some of the resources you can access. Thank you, Dan.
Okay, good. All right. Well, thank